As I've recently been pivoting my focus towards streaming in the last few weeks, I've begun reviewing my game collection, finding many games in the process that for whatever reason, I've either barely played or overlooked entirely. One of those games being one that in retrospect, I feel like I slept on so hard it's criminal. That being the topic of today's video, Yoshi's Woolly World. Hello and welcome to the Absolute Gamecast. Today I'd like to discuss Yoshi's Woolly World, its story, its gameplay, and why following my 7-part playthrough of the game, it's become one of my new favorite games I've played. This video will also contain some story spoilers for the game, so if you want to play it blind, I recommend doing so first and coming back to watch this video later. Before breaking down the game's design, I'd also like to start with some basic context about the game for anyone who's never heard of it before. Yoshi's Woolly World is a side-scrolling platformer developed by Goodfeel and published by Nintendo for the Wii U, and is the 7th of the 8 mainline Yoshi games. I was not aware that many existed. The game was announced January 23rd, 2013, and was released to the public June 25th, 2015, giving it a development cycle of roughly 2 years. The story begins on a peaceful island until everything changes when Kamek swoops in and is like, "Hello Yoshi, it's me, Kamek. I'm going to kidnap your friends for literally no reason now. Bye!" and then flies away, leaving Yoshi to travel around the island, save his friends, and beat up Kamek or something. The overall story is very entertaining. It also features plenty of classic Mario wackiness in a way that perfectly fits the light-hearted style and atmosphere of the game. For example, Kamek was sent by Baby Bowser to kidnap Yoshi's friends so he could use their yarn to build a new castle, and now you have to fight him as the final boss. Yoshi canonically beats up a baby for like the 3rd time. Let that sink in. The whole adventure is entertaining, and having the player need to save Yoshi's friends provides a based and satisfying reason for Yoshi to want to go through all the shenanigans he encounters. The next talking point for this video is the gameplay, which is in my opinion one of the strongest aspects of this game. On paper, its mechanics are very simple, and if you have played one of the other main Yoshi games, you should be pretty familiar with how this one works, but for those who haven't, I'll explain the basics. Yoshi has a pretty straightforward moveset. He can collect and throw yarn balls. He has a jump, a ground pound, and even features his trademark flutter jump from the main Mario series, allowing him to clear decently large gaps fairly easily. Due to Yoshi's limited offensive options, it's very intuitive to figure out what attacks are most effective on which enemies. Most enemies a simple jump or yarn toss can deal with. Some enemies need to be ground pounded to be defeated, and some are covered with spikes or other hazards, meaning you probably shouldn't touch them. The fluid nature of the enemy mechanics leads nicely into the next aspect I'd like to discuss, that being the game's world and level design, which in my opinion might be the game's strongest gameplay aspect. Starting with the world design, if you watched my discussion of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, you would know that one of my biggest praises for that game was its world and level design, and how full of life it all felt. So it should be seen as a high compliment that I would honestly rank this game near equally in both departments. This game uses an arts and crafts aesthetic, and I would say each world was cleverly and clearly designed with that style in mind. Due to that, while the game shares similar world themes to other Mario games, everything is so stylized that it feels unique regardless. And for the level design, every level feels distinct, each with their own spin on the world theme and their own unique puzzle or gimmick. Throughout my series on the game, I was constantly excited before starting every level, since I never knew exactly what new puzzles I would be met with from level to level. Something else I liked about the level design is that with how the puzzles are presented to you, it's apparent the developers perfectly understood how every mechanic works. Many levels begin by presenting players with a simple puzzle and teach them how the gimmick works, through nothing but trial and error, leading to a feeling of satisfaction when you solve similar puzzles in the future, and especially when you hit a roadblock and are able to solve your problem through taking what you know and trying different interactions to find a solution. A great example of how the game handles this is World 2-3, Walk the Chomp to Unwind. This level uses a combination of knowledge obtained from previous levels, as well as new twists on that knowledge to test the player. World 1 teaches you that you can push large boulders that resemble the chain chomps covered in yarn, letting you know you can push them after covering them with yarn. The bundled chomps also have knots, which let you know that you can unravel them when necessary. The level teaches you just enough that you understand its gimmick, but are given fair enough room to still figure things out for yourself. While many of the game's other levels follow the same philosophy in their own ways, there are a handful that I feel can be a little bit too challenging. One example is 6-4, Not Wing the Koopa's Sky Fort. The level's beginning is pretty good. It has a gimmick that players are familiar with, being the timed platforms seen earlier in the game. The main issue I had with the level was the final section. The entire section is set over a large pit with small rising balloons as your only platforms, and bullet bill launchers firing both bullet bills and bullseye bills that home in and pop the balloons you stand on, making falling into the death pit very common. And with how difficult the following boss can be, as well as the checkpoint placement, you'll likely have to replay this section several times if you happen to die. Although, to be fair, it is at the end of the final mid-castle of the game, so the difficulty is somewhat justified. Overall, I stand by my opinion that the world and level design is probably the best aspect of this game. The final gameplay section I'd like to discuss is the boss fights. The boss fights are another part of this game that I feel was crafted very well. Every boss in this game has a core pattern to defeating them, usually executing one of your attacks and then jumping on or ground pounding them when they're vulnerable. While this may sound simple, which it is, that simplicity ultimately works to the game's benefit because it allows players to quickly discover how the boss works on their first attempt, and if you happen to die, you would then know how the boss fight works, allowing you to go into the next attempt with more knowledge. This pattern to boss fights makes the boss fights feel very fair, and more like a battle of using your knowledge until you win, with death feeling less like a punishment and more like a minor setback due to a personal mistake. Overall, Yoshi's Woolly World's gameplay is most definitely its best aspect in my personal opinion, as I feel like everything is balanced decently well, and was designed in a way that in a short amount of time leaves players understanding the game mechanics well, and you're continually met with so many fun and challenging levels for the whole experience that test you on your familiarity of what you've been taught so far. In conclusion, I would highly recommend Yoshi's Woolly World if you can find a copy for sale today. The story is fun, the gameplay is very beginner-friendly and satisfying, and while playing through, I almost never felt like the game was unfair, and I could just sit back and have a good time. Before I end this video, I'd like to say to everyone who discovered the channel through this series, thank you so much for all your recent support. And while I don't think the series is quite over yet, I hope you continue to enjoy the other content I make in the meantime. I think that about does it for this video, and if you made it all the way to this point, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Not gonna force you, do what you want. Thanks for tuning in, and that's the video. Bye.